Welcome back to the Berserk Monster Manual, where we take a Dungeons & Dragons-like approach to this fantasy series and give you the breakdown on every fantastical monster, beast, and astral entity presented in Kentaro Miura's manga masterpiece, Berserk. And today's episode is the Elves. A brief history of where elves come from in our real world. The word seems to be Germanic in origin and translates to something along the lines of white being. I'm assuming by white they mean white like glowing and nothing to do with skin tone. They were imagined to be small creatures that could bring either healing or illness to humans, and were usually neutral to humanity as a whole. Old stories of elves usually describe them as magically powerful, sometimes invisible, and living close to human societies. Some even suggested that they would seduce humans sexually and then abduct them. For what, I'm not exactly sure, but I might be into it. Now, from what I've looked up, it seems as though the word elf got commonly interchanged with fairy throughout time and through different stories, which I think is very interesting because when we first see an elf in Berserk, he's tiny like I would imagine a fairy to be. And until Puck called himself an elf, I just simply assumed he was a fairy. But Miura actually took the original idea of what an elf was for Berserk, rather than what we think of elves in a more modern context. Elves seem to get bigger over time. We of course have Santa's little helpers, who are usually described as about 2 feet tall with pointed ears. And famously in the Tolkien novels, and then later in the movies, The Lord of the Rings, elves are more human-sized and become capable badasses that you would want in a fight. Along with that, most medieval and fantasy genre stories tend to have their elves similar to the Tolkien version. Tolkien didn't create the human-sized elf concept, but he definitely would be a pioneer of it along the way. Since then, there have been hundreds upon hundreds of fantasy stories and games involving elves. Some with the human-sized ones like Tolkien's, others have short 2-foot-tall size ones. Dobby from Harry Potter comes to mind. But most of them usually include that elves live a long time, or are immortal, and are connected to nature in some way. In Berserk, elves are extremely important entities. We first see an elf in the very first chapter of the manga in the form of the character Puck, who would go on to be a main character throughout the entire series. Like I said, the first thing you notice is that Puck resembles of what we would think a fairy to be, but this is actually closer to the original folklore than any of the taller elves that we would see in more modern ones. They're small, have wings, and are humanoid looking for the most part. Like all fantastical Berserk creatures, elves are from the astral world, an abstract world that includes many layers and levels that house both good and evil creatures, as well as dead spirits and the afterlife. Elves are descendants of the core elementals that make up the world of Berserk. There are 4 types that elves descend from: the sylphs, that of the wind. Those elves are called piskies. This is the classification that Puck and Avalora go into. And the others are from the original elementals: the salamanders, that of the fire; undines, that of the water; and gnomes, that of the earth. Many years ago, elves were prominent in the physical world and lived alongside mankind, but with the advent of the Holy See religion, it caused both hostility to beings like them, and also that in Berserk, if one's mind is deeply held in a belief that these creatures can't or shouldn't exist, they cease to be able to perceive the creatures at all. Elves become invisible to those who are deeply devoted to religious faith. With the Holy See on the rise throughout mankind, most elves left the physical world to return to Elfhelm, an island home for them. Notable places that once had elf inhabitants would be the Misty Valley and the caves near Godot's house. And even with elves being gone for hundreds of years, these areas are still basked in their energy a bit and provide a safe place from those looking to escape from restless spirits. To a degree, anyway. Along with not being able to be perceived by most humans, elves, like most astral beings, do become more likely to be noticed by children, as their minds are more open to the idea of their existence. But whether from children talking and sharing stories or just susceptible adults, stories and ideas about elves are still prevalent enough, the notable one being about that of Peikoff. Peikoff is a tale of a boy with pointed ears and red eyes that was picked on and bullied because of his appearance. Peikoff believed himself to really be an elf, and ran into the forest to find an area where the elves resided. When he did, the elves told him that he was not one of them, as he doesn't have wings. Apparently, when he was a baby, his parents brought him into a forest to see if the elves could cure him of an illness. They were able to, but as a result, his eyes and ears changed. Running back to his home now, realizing that his parents are truly his parents, Peikoff discovers upon exiting the land of the elves, many years had passed in the physical world, and everyone he knew was long since dead. Unknown to humans who would share this tale, the time skip actually comes from the fact that time moves differently in the astral world than it does in the physical world. Time spent in the astral world can amount to many years passing in the physical. But similarly to the Holy See discouraging against astral beings, the Peikoff tale is one of caution that would seem to dissuade humans from looking for elves in the first place. The home of most of the elves is a land called Elfhelm, located on the island of Skelling, but as part of the astral world interstice, could only be found by those who are very susceptible to the fantastical. It's seemingly a paradise where many peaceful astral creatures reside, including unicorns, centaurs, and much, much more, along with humans who have devoted their lives to magic and the supernatural, most of whom have trained for years and have become very wise because of this. Elfhelm too also has a very different flow of time than that of the physical world, but has yet to be shown by just how much. The island does have a king or ruler in the form of the Flower Storm Monarch. Her name is Danon, very beautiful and incredibly powerful, also the size of an average human, but with very fantastical looking features. The extent of her power and abilities is unclear at the moment, but she does possess an ability to access the Corridor of Dreams, basically entering into the mind of an individual to mend and heal their mind and look into the deepest, most repressed part of their memories. It may just be an extension of the average powers and abilities that elves have of empathy. And leading from that, elves in Berserk have several unique qualities and skills. Obviously, there's flight, that they have wings, but they're also shown to be extremely empathetic. They're able to pick up on your emotions, even those you're hiding beneath the surface, and understand where you are coming from mentally, and to an extent, what's going on inside your head. One of the first things we learn about Puck is that he senses the deep hatred and sadness within Guts' heart. And it's one of the things that motivate him to follow Guts in the first place. Just trying to figure out why Guts was doing what he was doing. As well, elves tend to feel the same emotions that we feel when they sense them. This led Puck to feeling frightened, cold, and uncomfortable many times. Elves also possess a healing ability in the form of elf dust, something that can be created by fluttering their wings. It seems to work on just about anyone as long as they are able to obtain some elf dust. Without Puck around, Guts would most likely have died from several of his injuries. But also just having a bag of elf dust, even without an elf present, or belief in elves, seems to heal injuries just as well. Judeau had some in the Golden Age arc and figured why not try it, whether he believed in elves or not. This also relates to the original mythology of how elves could bring healing and sickness to humans. And the final unique ability of elves is that they are able to make themselves glow and flash, relating again back to the original myths. This can light the way somewhere or just be used like a shining really bright light into somebody's eyes, which can temporarily blind and disorient them. Elves seem to, as traditionally, live hundreds upon hundreds of years, but we have yet to see an elf's death in Berserk. Given that Puck and Avalra are the two main characters of the story that are elves, often fear for their lives during big battles and moments, one would believe that elves can be killed by conventional means. Just being able to actually hit them would be the problem, as they are small, fast, and can fly. Elves are all good natures in Berserk, so there wouldn't be a reason to even try and kill them unless you were evil yourself, but I imagine with the right kind of firepower, you could eventually get the job done. But again, for an offensive, elves wouldn't really be able to hurt you either, just temporarily blind you to make their escape. Their threat level is at an all-time low here, and that's assuming you could even see them. So maybe put down your Holy See Bible and take a stroll through the woods at night during a full moon, and maybe, just maybe, you'll stumble upon an elf's domain. Well, thank you so much for watching this video, guys. I hope you learned something about elves. Share some more facts down below if you have any. Thanks for watching. Stick around if you want to see more Berserk content. Go ahead and subscribe, like the video if you want to, all that jazz. And I'll talk to you guys in the next video.